Good evening, and welcome to our second Our Collective Power virtual speaker series of the year. I am your host for tonight, Christopher Scott. I am the National Political Director for the Collective PAC. I'm really excited about this panel that we have with us tonight in discussing reimagining the criminal justice system. In 2021, in March of this year, we officially launched our Justice for All initiative. And we launched this initiative to have a specific focus on intentionally electing people, Black candidates, to impactful positions within the criminal justice system, whether or not it's attorney general, judicial races, sheriff races, prosecutor races. We know if we want to reform the criminal justice system, then we need more people, not just with the professional experience, but the lived experience to actually do what needs to be done and pushing forward the progressive policies that we need to fix this broken system. So I am really excited for this group tonight. First, welcoming to the stage, we have Portsmouth Commonwealth attorney Stephanie Morales out of Virginia. We have Alvin Bragg, who is the candidate for Manhattan District Attorney in New York. And then we have Delegate Jay Jones, who is the candidate for Virginia Attorney General. Good evening, everybody, and thanks so much for joining the Collective PAC tonight.
Good evening. Thanks for having us.
So look, we're just going to jump right into this thing. Virginia, y'all had some monumental changes happen today in becoming the 23rd state to abolish the death penalty. And so I want to start with that and just how much of an impact does that have when we talk about even where the conversation for reforming criminal justice lives? I know the governor said, look, we cannot, move for a capital punishment when we can't always be 100% sure that we're making the right decision. And if we know that we have a flawed system, we can't be seeking capital punishment. But I want to start with Jay. You're running for Attorney General. What are your thoughts on just how much this means? I know you've been a huge champion for it, and then we'll kick it over to Attorney Morales. So, Jay?
Yeah, well, thank you, Chris, for having me tonight. It's good to see Alvin and me and to be able to have these. And I'll tell you, this is a special moment in Virginia. I was there this afternoon at Greensville Correctional Center in Jarrett, Virginia, to watch the governor sign the abolition of the death penalty in Virginia, the first Southern state to do it, the 23rd overall. And frankly, I think it's been a labor of love over the last couple of years. But I will be honest with you, I think it's even sort of shocking that we're even having this conversation, because even a few years ago, people thought this was the third rail of justice reform in Virginia. You can't even talk about it because it was one of those things that was so embedded in our system and embedded within people's minds. And, I gave a speech on the floor this year about how this is nothing but state-sponsored lynching. You see the data suggests that as lynchings went down, convictions and death penalties went up in Virginia. And so this was a huge step for us to take Jim Crow and the Black codes out of our code once and for all as it relates to this. We got a lot of work to do, and I know Stephanie will agree with me on that. But this is truly magnificent. And I had tears in my eyes this afternoon just thinking about how we got to this point. My mother was defending a guy from who was up for the death penalty in the mid-90s, and that informed my view on this as a child. And so to see, 20-something years later, to be able to vote to repeal the death penalty and to witness the abolition of it today, come July 1, I mean, this is going to be a completely different landscape, and we're better for it.
Stephanie?
So thank you for having me. I will say, this is one step in the direction of having true transformative change in our Commonwealth. This is, the death penalty and the enforcement of the law. It disproportionately impacts Black people and marginalized communities. And this is something that has had an impact on generations of families, like many other things in our criminal legal system. So, yes, it was a good thing to see the governor sign the abolition of the death penalty. But frankly, we need transformative change across the board. And I want to see that followed by ending mandatory minimums and by automatic expungement and all of the things that permit, Commonwealth attorneys to do second chances like other prosecutors can do in other states, to have true conviction integrity units, to end cash bail. There are so many things that we could do to really make sure that we have a true system of justice, because right now we most certainly do not. So I don't ever want to be the one to, take away from the moment of greatness, that we see. But the reality is we have so much to do to unwind the status quo and to transform this system from the inside out. And as a Black woman first and prosecutor second, I feel the struggle and the strain every single day doing this job as a prosecutor, to ensure that we are working to undo the harms that have been done to members of my community for so long. But it's important also to note that as a Black woman, I recognize that all other prosecutors, anybody else who's going to be right for this profession going forward, Black, white, Asian, whatever your orientation is, it doesn't matter, your religion, we should all be feeling the same internal battle, because until all of us are safe and free from a system that is doing harm, really none of us are, and we cannot allow the apathy to continue. So very happy about today, very relieved, I think is the better, indicator. But I will be even more relieved when we have more transformative change. Incremental change and moving the needle is a failure.
Alvin, from your perspective, obviously you're not in Virginia, but what do you feel like in having this topic and conversation on abolishing the death penalty? Where does that rank when we talk about making real comprehensive criminal justice reform?
So, Chris, thank you for having me. And I'm not a Virginian by birth. I'm a lifelong New Yorker. But my parents are both from Petersburg, Virginia. I spent every summer of my life in Virginia. And so, hearing Jay talk about, what he said on the floor, I know Stephanie's jurisdiction. So while I'm not there physically, there's a big part of my heart that's in Virginia. And to see this step forward today is important. But I want to pick up where Stephanie left off, which is, I'm in a state where, we don't have the death penalty, but we have all the problems that Stephanie listed. So it is a part of a bundle of reform. I think we have to applaud all of the steps, but we need to look at it holistically, and everything that Stephanie mentioned, bail, death penalty, all these, the through line is the racial disparities, going back to the history that Jay started with, talking about the interaction between the lynchings and the start of the death penalty. So I'm encouraged by Virginia, feel a particular pull to my heart because I have so much family there. But I know from the experience here in New York that, as Stephanie eloquently said, it's just as part of the picture. We've got to look at the whole picture. And we also know that when one thread gets pulled, sometimes the discrimination just shifts to something else and mutates. So we have to remain vigilant, and so happy to kind of be here with this group to talk about how we can collectively be vigilant.
So as I mentioned earlier, we launched our Justice for All initiative this year. And looking at just the root of that word, and I want to start with Stephanie, because you really teed up a lot of these things. One, when you hear the phrase justice for all, what does it actually mean to you? And then also looking at from the perspective of the position that you have, what do you feel like your responsibility is to make an impact and making meaningful criminal justice reform at this point?
So hearing justice for all, that's most certainly not what we have now. What we have now is justice for some and no justice for most. And, that means on a day-to-day basis, people who come through the criminal legal system, many of them are not treated fairly from the point where they first make contact, which is sometimes in their community or on the street. Their rights get violated, nothing happens. And then there's a lack of procedural justice, meaning from beginning to end, from the arraignment through the pretrial motions, the bail process, the trial itself, post-trial probation, there is a lack of fairness. There is inequity in how people are treated, and nobody's needs are attended to. So when we talk about justice for all, and what can be done to ensure that there's adequate reform, we need to be looking at the whole person and the whole community. We cannot simply look at ourselves as prosecutors and think that our duty is in the courtroom. We are public servants. That means that we need to be advocating for the allocation of resources for education, for removing, the school to prison pipeline, maybe removing these school resource officers and having them replaced with mental health professionals, to provide resources for children who underwent trauma. We need to be looking at mental wellness for people who come through the system. We need to be looking at addiction issues and how to treat that through behavioral health care. And the bottom line is we need to move the resources into areas where we can actually help our community members succeed and thrive, so that we aren't continually having this conversation about mere survival. And so to put it very clearly, justice is not what we're seeing now. This system, it is working and operating the exact way it was designed to work. And so if we want to see true justice, we have to look outside the court building. We have to look outside of the jail. The over-incarceration, the mass incarceration, it is not making us any safer. The statistics are showing that. And so we now have to push against the status quo, intentionally decarcerate, so that we can take those resources out of incarceration and put them where they need to be, in the community, solving food insecurity, solving homelessness, making sure that there's adequate opportunity for education, for mental health care services, and for, industry, and for us to begin as Black people to build intergenerational wealth and not pass down intergenerational trauma as a result of this heavy footprint of the criminal legal system on people's lives.
That's powerful. Alvin, what does justice for all mean for you?
A lot of the same things. We have a system that is, we've seen this play out in Manhattan with some high profile cases, Harvey Weinstein and Jeffrey Epstein and others, that just, has failed to hold accountable those with privilege and access. But on the other hand, is overly punitive in communities of color and communities living in poverty, and just having two standards of justice, right? This is one of our most, bedrock principles in our Constitution, that we have one standard of justice for all. Just from my island here in Manhattan, the one that sticks out to me is, we had a gynecologist from Columbia, associated with Columbia, who sexually assaulted dozens of patients, and the plea resolution was for no jail time. And you compare that to a homeless person who bought food and toothpaste with one counterfeit bill, and the very same prosecutor's office recommended for that homeless person a sentence of 5 to 10 years. That's not justice for all, right? That's a nonsensical system that will fall under its own weight. And so, we've seen this for far too many years. And I'm happy to be, kind of a part of, talking about how we just radically reform this, and happy to kind of be what I call in the 2.0 as a candidate. Folks like Stephanie and others before, they've paved the way, right? They've shown the record of how we can, have both true community-based public safety and a fair system that invests in people, uplifts civil rights. We can have both. We deserve both, and we demand both.
So I want to touch on the representation aspect when we talk about getting to justice for all. And we just look at the enormous gaps that we have in actually having people that look like us, understand our type of experiences, are professionally ready to step in day one and do what needs to be done. But we know for the fact 95% of prosecutors are still white. When we look at attorney generals in this country, I think you only have 5 or 6 that are actually Black people right now. Can we talk about, and I want to start with Jay with this, what it means to have representation, authentic representation, that understands that lived experience, and can use that to apply as well as their professional experience, and making a system that actually does do justice for all and not just justice for some, as Stephanie mentioned. Jay?
Well, look, I think I think when we talk about this, right, we are looking at, and it's not just in Virginia, it's all across the country, justice systems and criminal codes, right, that have been put in place a couple of hundred years ago. And so it's got the vestiges of inequality baked in. And when you have people who look like us, who are administering those systems, that sends a signal. And I talk about this on the campaign trail because Virginia's never had a Black attorney general before. We've had a Black statewide elected officer elected twice, Doug Wilder and Justin Fairfax. But from a standpoint of what people believe, and they believe that the attorney general or the prosecutor, you're the top cop. And so I think it really does send an incredible message to people when you have people who look like what that system has oppressed, in Virginia's case for 400 years. When you have people who look like what that system has oppressed, who are in charge, that means something. And you have someone at the top who is setting the tone to say, look, this system is not okay, right? We have some real issues that we've got to confront. And you can use that pulpit and that platform to lead. And every attorney's general office is created differently in each state. So I can't talk about the way it is with Tish James in New York, right, where Alvin is. But here, it's a creature of statute. And so you use your platform to push on these issues with the legislature, in addition to what you can already do. But I think when we talk about lived experiences and how the code has been used in a perverse way against people of color, and particularly Black people, we have an opportunity in 2021 and beyond to really reorient ourselves. And I think it's unfortunate that it took a George Floyd, that it took an Ahmaud Arbery, it took a Breonna Taylor to get people who don't look like us to wise up and say, yeah, maybe this isn't okay. Because and it's something that I think about a lot. Rodney King was 30 years ago, right? He was beaten on tape by the police. They had him dead to rights. And those guys walked out of that courtroom with acquittals. And so we have these instances, these very public instances over the course of many moons. And so I think as we've begun this shift, and Stephanie was a trailblazer down here, we have people who finally understand, one, that it's okay to run for office, because I think traditionally Black folks have been, told, wait your turn, this isn't for you, how could you, sort of have these positions? And two, you have people who are going to run, who can win, and who have the courage to speak truth to power, right? And to live it up to the values that we talk about, because it's very easy for other candidates to talk about how much they're about this reform life. And then they get in office, and then, you don't hear from them. They're quiet as a church house mouse on the issues that are really, really important to our communities. And one issue, and we can talk about this, later if you want, in Virginia, that I've been pushing for, very, very, strongly with a couple of colleagues, is ending qualified and sovereign immunity. And, that is, it seems like now people don't want to talk about that. But, when you have people who have the lived experiences, I think we've all had interactions with the police to varying degrees. That's a big thing for us. And so my lived experience, Stephanie's lived experience, Alvin's lived experience, it makes us better, and it makes, I think, our system stronger, because we can say, look, we've been through this before and we know how to change it.
Stephanie, before we go on for a second, can you just talk a little bit about the fact that I believe it's still less than 1% of prosecutors are Black women, but I know you guys are a tight-knit cohort in making sure that you support each other. But can you just talk about, one, what is the need for having that type of coalition and support? You've been one of the people that have not only talked the talk, but walked the walk. But what does it mean to be in a space where less than 1% of you are actually doing this work and trying to push for these reforms?
It has been, tremendously difficult to be, in a place where oftentimes you feel lonely, and sometimes the only other support that you do have is your Black woman elected sisters. All of us have, went out and done things that required courage. For me, one of the things that I did very early on was prosecute a police officer and end up with a conviction in that case, which started about 3 months after I took office. And there was a lot of, unfair media criticism that my white elected male, and white woman counterparts never experienced. There was just, a tremendous amount of racism and sexism at the same time, which is misogynoir. And, it is something that I don't shy away from talking about, because we need people to understand that the dynamic approaches that these Black women have taken have been so critical in changing the status quo that it brings on the attack. But the problem is that we need other people to stand with us when we're going through that, because we have set the example for what it means, to have an understanding of being a mother, being a sister, being, a part of a community in a different way than many other people who are in these positions. So, it's extremely critical to support Black women, and people like to put that on a shirt. That seems like the cool thing to do too, since this past year. But that means more than just putting it on a shirt. We actually need people to support us, to call out the injustices against Black women who are working in the system. It seems as if Kim Gardner in St. Louis, Missouri, she was constantly going through things, Aramis Ayala in Florida. There were these constant attacks, and it's always us supporting each other. And I won't say that there's no other support, because there are amazing organizations and people who do stand up to support us. But overwhelmingly, early on in 2015, I had, to create this social media platform where I was telling my own story, because there was a completely different narrative than, than what my community felt and what I was experiencing. So having a low number like that, 1 to 2% of elected women prosecutors, it's extremely important for us to increase that number because of the brilliant work that my elected sisters have done. It's very obvious that if we could get more, we get more amazing work. So I will always stand in support with my sisters. And I always, I'll said it before and I'll say it again. Before I'm a prosecutor, before I'm a public servant, I'm a Black woman. And we need more Black people who are unapologetically so running these offices and in a position of power, to not just, say, moving forward, I'll do X, Y, Z, but to have the heart and the spirit to go back and fight to undo, all the harms, and to put plans in place so that when we're gone, that we succession plan so that somebody else, another Black woman, can come and pick up the ball and run with it and take it to the next level.
So I want to stay with you for a second on this. Again, you've been doing a lot of the work already. One of our core focus areas when we look at our Justice for All initiative is looking at recidivism. So I want you to talk for a second. You created the Control Alt Delete program. You've written a children's book now to inspire children. But can you talk a little bit about that program, and then, how did you even get to the children's book and how it all ties in together in this work?
Right. So there are actually 2 programs that tie into the, into what I do to try to combat recidivism and to have prevention. So the Control Alt Delete is the one that is in place since 2015 to assist our brothers and sisters who are incarcerated and formerly incarcerated, to help them understand, how to navigate life when they come out. What does it mean to have to be on probation? How do you use that probation office as a resource? What are your fines and fees, structures? What do you have to do to ensure that you're in compliance with that? How do you obtain employment? Providing them with a list of over 100 employers who will employ people with felonies. Talking about how to form businesses, resume writing, giving them samples. It was to the point where one of the correctional facilities that we visit actually bound and created a book, like a reference guide, out of the materials that we gave them, that people who were about to be released could check out to utilize. And so it started off in the community, but it went into the prisons. And when I say we, I don't mean I sent the people in my office off to do it. I mean, I'm there every single time, along with the members of my office. So we provide this service to the members of the community, but then also that changes my attorneys. I've seen the shift in those who don't have the lived experience. When they go to prison, when they go to state prison and they spend all day and they realize these are people's loved ones, these are people with different senses of humor. We ate with them. We all talked about like this red drink that it was so phenomenal, and then we realized it was Kool-Aid. It just brought home that these are members of our community that we also serve as public servants. And it makes them think twice about how they treat these individuals who have lives, you know, when they have the power in their hands to determine how long they will be incarcerated. So that program has been up and running since 2015 for 6 years. And then there's a Future Leaders Initiative where I spend a great deal of time with young people in the office. Over 200 young people at this point have come in the office. And then I constantly go into the schools to talk with young people about their behaviors, how they intersect with the law, and just how to get them to understand how brilliant they are and how they're our future leaders. They're next up to come and do what we're doing. And we need them on this track. And so the book tells my story about how when I was a little girl, my mom took me to visit the courthouse, and that laid the foundation for my career in the law. But I always tell that to my young people when I visit with them in school and when I have them in my office. And, you know, it just felt like time to expand the reach of that story, to really try to inspire our young people to see themselves as the future leaders of our society. You know, we spend too much time talking about scared straight and, you know, having school resource officers in schools who are, you know, preparing children for imprisonment, not for higher education. And so it was really important to me to have them. One, I have this book here because I just read to a group, but I need them to see themselves. We need representation. You know, we need our young people to see themselves in future positions of power in a positive light with caring parents. And so all of these initiatives just tie into community engagement and to ensuring that while I'm in this role and while I'm seeking legislative reform and doing the work every day in the courtroom and with my attorneys, that we are also engaging and having that same amount of energy laid into our community and investing in our people in a way that has not been done, to, again, reverse these harms that have been perpetuated on Black people for so long. So I have more programs on the way, and I will never stop innovating to try to see our people, again, truly succeed and thrive.
Well, before I move on, we're definitely going to have to connect offline so I could get that book for my 2.5-year-old son. He's getting more into, well, we're trying to get him more to read. So definitely have to share stories like that. But you, when we talk about innovation, you queued me up to go to Alvin. The funny thing is, I feel like what is innovating, but we don't hear a lot about it, is when we talk about accountability. It's something that shouldn't have to be innovative. It should be something that we do naturally. But when we talk about criminal justice, we know there is a serious problem when we talk about accountability, whether or not we're talking about even accountability in how our public servants govern and the crimes they commit. We know we have a huge problem when it comes to, you know, the officers that are involved in police brutality and having a system of accountability. So, Alvin, that is one of your core principles, what you're campaigning on as you're seeking the Manhattan District Attorney office. And it's something that you're not a stranger to in the previous positions you had held. Can you talk a little bit about just how accountability, how that became a core issue for you, and how it influences so many other aspects, even when we're talking about intentionally ending mass incarceration, reducing sex crime, how so much of that does start and centered on accountability to start with?
Definitely, Chris. So, I mean, to me, this is a cornerstone issue. I mean, I went to law school in large part because, you know, growing up in Harlem, I was stopped countless times by the NYPD and 3 times at gunpoint. And it was those 3 gunpoint experiences. I said, this, you know, I didn't need a law degree to know it was lawless, right? You know, fingers stuck in my pocket, gun inches from my head, falsely accused of being a drug dealer. You know, it was also, I'm, you know, about the same age as the exonerated Central Park 5. So these are the experiences that drove me to law school. And throughout my career, I mean, I started out as a civil rights lawyer. My first, you know, one of my first court appearances was in a case against the state police for breaking up a religious and political protest. This was 20 years ago. This wasn't just last summer, right? We've been at this for a long time. And it's at the heart of everything for me because it's community trust, right? If you can't trust the people who are policing you, the rest of the system falls under its own weight. So, you know, as a federal prosecutor, I prosecuted an FBI agent for lying. When I was in the New York State Attorney General's office, we prosecuted a sitting district attorney We allege that that district attorney basically threw a case that he was investigating a police officer he worked with who shot at 8 times and killed an unarmed Black person. This is at the root of trust. If we cannot trust those who are given the power to kill under our system, we cannot trust them to testify truthfully. How are we going to ask all the other witnesses, hey, you got to testify truthfully? That's how the system works when the police officer witnesses are not. So to me, it is fundamental. We can't get to any other issues until we can't fully have reform unless we start here. And I will just say, as a candidate, it's, I experienced it when I was in office. We prosecuted that district attorney. He said, well, you're the chief, law enforcement officer for the whole state. You can't prosecute a sitting district attorney. Well, we said, well, how could we not? Right? That's our job, to enforce the law. And now as a candidate, right, I'm actively campaigning for Manhattan District Attorney, but I'm also, representing Gwen Carr, Eric Garner's mother, in a lawsuit against the mayor and the NYPD. And there's some people who say you can't do that, right? You can't sue the NYPD and run for district attorney. And I said, what do you mean? It's an independent office. I'm going to govern independently and objectively, and as district attorney, I'm going to hold accountable those who lie and those who engage in excessive force. So I'm practicing on the campaign trail exactly what I'm going to do in office. But for some people, they want to segregate them. But I think we always have to remind them that you really cannot have true public safety without the confidence of the people, right? How are you going to call witnesses, right? How are you going to have the trust of those who've been harmed, who are victims or survivors, when you are not holding accountable the people doing the investigation? So to me, it is fundamental. It is the starting premise. And we have lots and lots of work to do, which is obvious, not just in Manhattan and New York, but obviously throughout the country.
Jay, I want to come back to you for a second. I feel like we've been seeing this huge new wave, new generation of public servants in Virginia. We see more public servants that are more diverse. Really, since I think about 2017, you guys have been on that wave. When you look at your candidacy, we already know it's historic. But we're talking about a Black man running for attorney general in a state like Virginia with its history that is running a competitive race to be the top law enforcement officer. And I know you can't say it, but I'll say it, running against a person that wore blackface, but wants to represent one of the highest offices when it comes to criminal justice. But you really are a generational type candidate and running in Virginia. Can you talk a little bit about just what are the two things that really inspired you to make this run at this time? And what does it mean to have Jay Jones as the face at the top when we look at justice in Virginia?
Yeah, it's a fascinating landscape here in Virginia at the moment. I'm really fortunate because I stand on the shoulders of giants. Like everybody who is on this chat, right? I'm the descendant of slaves on both sides. And it is never lost on me as I go around, what would they think? What would they feel about their descendant having the opportunity to hold this position? My grandfather was very involved in the civil rights movement, had my uncle and my father integrate a school here in Norfolk in 1960. And so, we've come a long way. But I do think that when you look at why you run, yes, your family informs you. Yes, your passions inform you. But I think politics is a lot about timing. It is a lot about meeting the moment. And I do think that what we've seen here in Virginia, in particular, over the last 4 or 5 years, has been a rapid change in our population. We are rapidly diversifying. We are rapidly growing. We're 8.5 million people. This is not the Virginia of 2017, of 2013, of my parents' generation. I mean, this is a new dominion. And I think we are the vanguard of the South in a lot of ways in terms of who we are electing. When I came into the legislature 4 years ago, we elected the first openly LGBT woman. We elected the first transgender woman. We elected Hispanics. We elected Asians. We elected Black folk. And it was something that I think the folks who created the system of government would have been shocked at because we were the Rainbow Coalition. But I think as we hit 2021, with all of the things that we've seen here in Virginia and seen across this country, that this state is ready for Black leadership, right, at all levels. It's not just Attorney General. We're ready for a Black governor. We're ready for we've had a Black lieutenant governor, ready for a Black attorney general. We are ready for more folks in the Black caucus. We've got 23 members out of 140 in the House and the Senate. And so I'd love to see us grow those ranks. But those motivations is, for me, sort of root in fixing our justice system, right? And using that pulpit and that platform in a way that it's never been used before. And we'll probably talk about this, but we talk about reform, and I think everyone talks about little things that we can do on an inch by inch basis, whether it's abolishing the death penalty, reforming probation and parole. We need to start over, right? We need to start from scratch, right? 18.2 and 19.2, which is where the criminal stuff is housed here in Virginia, is no good. And I think Stephanie will agree that we need to start from scratch, because when you think about reform from a conceptual basis, it means that you have to change something that started off inequitable in the first place. And we should really be thinking from a more long-term perspective about changing how we start from scratch again. But I think what we do here in Virginia, whether it's at the Commonwealth attorney level, attorney general, legislative level, we're sending a signal to people that Black folks have the capacity, right? This is not the time when you say, well, you are credentialed, but you can't win. That's been thrown out the window, I think. And so what motivates me is making change for people who look like me, because we are a really sort of major force in the state. And also setting the stage so that, I'm not going to do this forever, that we have long-term staying power, and that this isn't just a moment, a flash in the pan where we've seen some real sort of strife as it relates to race relations and race issues in this country, but we make it so that we've got half of the legislature, or more than half of the legislature, is people of color, right? Black folks. We've got statewide office holders who are all Black. I mean, that to me is not some sort of crazy aspirational goal. That's where I think we need to be. And I think when you think about who has the best, sort of experience with changing the system, it's people who have experienced the system themselves firsthand, whether it's in the courtroom, right? I think like all the three of us have done. I have colleagues who have been incarcerated and who are now elected. We have some incredible stories and some incredible perspectives and viewpoints. And so there's so much that goes into where we are right now in Virginia. And I think the momentum is only growing, and the wave is only getting bigger. And so it's on us not only to do it for ourselves, but to bring other people along, right? I try to hire, people of color exclusively for my staff, so that I can train them so that they can run, right? My campaign manager in 2017 became my chief of staff. He ran for the legislature in 2019 in his own right and won, and he's now a colleague of mine. And so we talk about building collective power, building Black power. Yes, it's us as elected officials and candidates, but it's the legacy that we're leaving. And so I think that is another big motivating factor for me is how people look at what we were able to do, 10, 15, 50 years on.
Jay, I feel like you were peeking in my notes for the next question, but let me just get right to it. Is our criminal justice system too broken to fix? Is it something that we need to start from scratch and really at the roots, or is it something that we can still incrementally work on comprehensive reform and get it fixed? And I want to start with Stephanie on this one.
So I think I said it before, I can't remember, but incremental change is a failure. Moving the needle is a failure. This system right now, as it's structured, it's operating how it was designed to structure. It's not broken. How it was designed to work. It's not broken. How do you restructure something that's, working the way it was structured to work? So, we often say that as a knee-jerk reaction, oh, the system is broken. It's failing us. Well, it is failing us, but it's not broken. This is how it was designed to operate. And so we truly have to, if you want to call it transforming the system, if you want to call it tearing it down and rebuilding it into something else, that is what we have to do. We have to create something that is centered around holistically investing in our communities, period. And that means that we take an approach that is not about incarceration, but it is about wholeness. That we, again, look at the things that are causing people to come in contact with this system: lack of resources, lack of opportunity, lack of ability to address trauma. mental health related issues, addiction issues. And we have to be creative. There are other countries like Portugal, they decriminalized drugs in Portugal since I think 2001. And they dispatched psychiatrists out to the streets to approach people who had addiction issues to see if they want to help. There are other countries that are doing things that are so creative that we can't even envision because we're so locked into this system that has harmed us. So we must absolutely transform this, tear it down, rebuild it, come up with something entirely different that allows communities to be invested in. Again, I can't say this enough, so that our people can begin to thrive. We have a nation where nobody has been expected to pull themselves up, quote unquote, by the bootstraps except Black people. Everyone else has had a hand up. It is time for the government to intentionally invest in Black people. And we must have that now. We know that, our people know that, and they're not just rising up now and didn't know this. I think they just found their voices because our lives have been on the line, and they had to find their voices in order to say, we will not tolerate this any longer. And the people who will bring us to where we need to get with this transformation, many of them are Black leaders who have been in the trenches quietly doing the work all this time. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing our communities be invested in and our families building intergenerational wealth and not passing down intergenerational trauma.
I feel like you took us a little bit to church there, but it is exactly what we needed to hear. Alvin, you look like you have something to chime in on that.
I was just gonna say amen.
So look,
you just gotta leave perfection as it is. That was it.
Don't touch it. Don't touch it. So look, we're gonna move to the rapid fire portion of this for a little bit. What's the hardest part about doing this work and working on realistic reform? And I'll start with Jay on this one.
You know, the hardest part as a legislator is that I've got to find 50 other votes in the House and 21 votes in the Senate to do this stuff. And I'm working with a lot of folks who don't look like me. And it can be incredibly frustrating. And you have these folks who every couple of years, they come to members of the Black Caucus and they say, please take us to your churches and please introduce us to your communities. We need to get elected and we need your help. And they come in and they tell us that they're going to vote for justice reform measures and they're going to help us and they're going to look out for the Black community. And then when we get to Richmond, you know, they ain't about that life. And it can be really frustrating because they ask us to vote for a lot of stuff that we don't necessarily love, but for them, they got to have it. And then when we get to a chance to make some real change for Black folks, they're like, well, you know, we might not be able to stomach that where we're from. And maybe we'll wait till next year where it's too expensive. Those are the two things that I hear the most in Richmond about why we can't do things. We need to wait, we're not ready, or it's too expensive. And I would submit that both of those things are wrong. And we're overdue for a lot of these changes. And Stephanie sort of mentioned it earlier when she said, yes, we need to savor the moment on the abolition of the death penalty. But some of these things that we're talking about are literally minimum threshold items. And they're so far, you know, out of whack, but people are too afraid to really make positive change by taking these votes because they're fearful that they're not going to get reelected. So I guess it's that issue with working with folks who, you know, don't necessarily feel it as we do because maybe they haven't been through it themselves and maybe they're a little bit fearful about how they'll be perceived. But, you know, frankly, you just got to keep pushing. And it's frustrating. I've probably lost weight and years off my life and hair off my head, you know, arguing with folks who are from Northern Virginia, suburban Richmond, you know, Southwest, South Side, about why these policies are really, really important. And it can be frustrating. It can feel like you're rolling that rock up the hill every day, only for at the end of the day, that rock to fall back down on you and you do it again. But we've come too far. And I think we have momentum. We've got a moment and you don't want to let that moment fly by. And, you know, I think about what Dr. King, what Julian Bond, what Andrew Young, what, you know, all these people whose shoulders we stand on would think about how we are doing this and how we are going about this and you know, why would we turn back now? And so, you know, it can be incredibly frustrating. It can be maddening, but we continue to push, we continue to fight. And, you know, part of the reason why I'm running for Attorney General is because I think we can really move on these issues, but you need someone in that spot who's going to use that platform to influence people and not just sort of be passive. You want someone who's going to be proactive and not reactive. And that's what pushes me.
Stephanie, you've been at it for what, 6 years now? What's been the hardest part during all this time?
The hardest part has just been literally, having people who will have the courage to stand up to the status quo on a day-to-day basis. It is one thing for me, I have these personal convictions. I'm the elected prosecutor and I'm just not afraid. I'm not afraid. I went in and I did that officer involved shooting case. I tried it myself. A lot of people will say, we did this and we did that. That was my case because I was unafraid. But everybody is not that way. And so every day, I have to have the right people who will go into court and not worry about a judge not liking them or having a bad reaction to them, or police not liking them or having a bad reaction. And you would be surprised, or maybe you wouldn't, at how many adult, professional, educated people worry about who likes them. And so for me, it's been a real challenge to get people to focus on just requiring mutual respect and not caring about who likes them, but to go in here and get down on the floor every single time, because each case that you have is not a file. It's not a case number. It's a person. It's somebody's life. It's their freedom at stake. And so trying to get people to get it right every single time is critical. We talk too much about equality and not equity. Treating everybody the same is not going to work. We truly have to get down and make sure that we're meeting people's needs every single time. If that means calling behavioral health care services to get them mental health related care, if that means talking to a child's teacher at school who's come to the juvenile justice system to see if they're hungry and if that's why they're acting out, and to figure out how we remove certain things from their life to get them on the path to success, that's what it requires. So having that real attention to detail every single time, that has been something that, I breathe, I live and breathe. That's not even considering like the outside forces. There have been outside forces of negativity, of nastiness. We had this situation at the monument where, several people were charged with felony offenses, including our public defender and many other people in the community. And there was no probable cause to support that. I ended up dismissing all of those cases. But before that, the officer who took the charges out tried to list me as a witness to get me off the case. So there have been these systemic actors who have been very problematic and will attempt to do certain things. But what we're not realizing and what we're not thinking about is these are high attention, high profile cases that we're hearing about. But I have to make sure that my people are protecting against this behavior every single day for the everyday people who don't get the press attention when the police go and take out a charge on them where probable cause is not supported. So we have to talk about these very serious issues that happen on a day-to-day basis that aren't hot button, they aren't sexy, they aren't cute, and you don't get news for, but you have to do the right thing when nobody is looking. So finding the right people who will do that is always critical. And that's why it's so important to have somebody at the helm who will make that a priority every single day.
Alvin, take us home. What's been the hardest part? And I think you're on mute.
At least once a day. At least once a day. Mercy. So I would say fear mongering and lies. We saw it with bail reform here in New York. Before the law even took effect. The sky was falling. Going back to the reform of the Rockefeller drug laws, the sky was falling. The sky is always falling. And to push through that, we had over the summer the mayor here and the police commissioner saying that COVID health releases and bail reform were driving up crime. And the NYPD's own data belied that assertion, right? But they had the bullhorn and they were yelling it. And that got other people worked up who might have been genuine and they got scared. And so fighting back that relentless, fear mongering, which isn't rooted in fact, isn't rooted in data, is a job of persistence. And I think that to me is one of the hardest parts. People who will not be tied to the truth and are trying to use their own narrative to push their own agenda. And they sit, far away from our communities many times. And I'm thinking, here, and I think it's probably true in Virginia as well, that often that charge is led by the police unions.
All right. To close things out, we're going to end on a little bit lighter note and have a little bit of fun. So we're going to start with Stephanie, because I definitely see you active on social media. If you had a theme song, what would your theme song be?
So I would have to say I can't give y'all anything real fun. I'm gonna give you the one that's like in my spirit, and that's gonna be Sounds of Blackness, Optimistic.
Jay, what would be your theme song?
Oh man. I mean, I've been listening to What's Next by Drake, so that's probably it for right now.
Alvin, what's your theme song?
I'm gonna keep it New York and go with Empire State of Mind.
Of course, I should have known. All right, staying with Alvin and going back down. If you weren't campaigning, how would you self-care right now?
I would have watched every single March Madness game last weekend.
I would be eating I'd be eating tacos with my wife and my cousin.
Stephanie?
Well, I still do this. I read fantasy books with dragons and lots of mages and old wars and sea creatures and all kinds of stuff. So I build in like a little bit of self-care for myself every day. And I encourage everybody to do the same thing, because what we don't need is leaders who are not whole. So that was my quick mama moment.
So wait, does that mean you're a fan of like Stranger Things or Game of Thrones as well?
Yes.
Okay. Just have to know. All right. Well, let's move to closing remarks. How can people support you in your elections coming up? Starting with Jay.
Well, if we're closing, I just want to say thank you. This has been a fantastic way to spend my evening with you guys and these champions of real and true change. But to support our efforts, you can go to our website, jjones.com, JAYJONES. Follow us on Twitter. Our handle's at the bottom. This is a critical election that we've got in Virginia. We can redefine ourselves and chart a new course. And we have all of the momentum, and we are building a campaign that is not only going to win in June, but definitely in November as well. I'm very proud of the fact that Governor Northam endorsed our campaign a few weeks ago. Certainly have the support of 35 members of the General Assembly and Congressman Elaine Luria. And this is an opportunity. This is a moment. And we've got to rise to meet this moment. And so anything that folks can do, whether it's pitching in a couple of dollars, phone banking, using social to spread our message, all of that will help, because that's going to get us to a better place, not just in Virginia, but across this country. Because I think the more folks who look like us who are in office, the better the results that we see.
Alvin?
Same here. I want to start by just thanking to be a part of the conversation, with you and Stephanie and Jay, and just to be a part of it is an honor. I'm at AlvinBragg.com, and we are facing a June primary as well. I think we're very well positioned to win. We've got more contributions from Manhattan than any other candidate. We just today filed the paperwork to be on the ballot. We needed 1,200 signatures. We submitted with more than 17,000. So we are poised to win, but we need more help. Got strong backing from my Harlem village here, and we've spanned throughout Manhattan. To folks who are watching from elsewhere, I would say, people are traveling through Manhattan. People are working here who don't live here. I think this race touches a lot of parts of our country, and we could really use your support. Like Jay said, it comes in all forms. We're phone banking 3 times a week. We are out on the street doing walkarounds, putting up our posters, and also, obviously we're fundraising. And we've got a billionaire candidate in our race who doesn't see reform like we do. So we need everyone's help, and I would welcome it, appreciate it, and be humbled by it. AlvinBragg.com and on social at AlvinBragg NYC.
Stephanie?
I have to thank you guys too so much for giving us this platform, this forum, and for the support. It it means the world. StephanieMorales.org, social is here. Just tap in. I think the guys have laid out, we all need contributions, we all need boots on the ground. But one thing that's so critical that we don't talk about enough is engagement. I really love hearing from my people. I want to hear what you're experiencing. I want to hear what you need. And I would like to use my platform to uplift your voices. So please use this opportunity while I'm out and about, which I always am, but more so than usual. And while we have this opportunity for virtual engagement, to tap in, let me know what's going on. Let me know what you're experiencing, because again, that commitment to innovation, it does not stop. I will continue to fight and push for what our people need, but only the members of our community who are having these experiences can truly tell us what they're going through on a day-to-day basis. So connect on social media. Social is up on the screen, StephanieMorales.org. Contributions are great. Engagement is even better. Thank you so much.
Well, look, I just really want to thank all of you all for joining us tonight, tapping in. I know it's been a long day for many of you. You could have been anywhere else, but you decided to spend it with us. So really, really thankful, especially for the work that you guys do every single day and moving our country forward. So from the collective pack to everybody watching, thank you so much for watching tonight. If you want to get more involved and you want to help us build Black political power, you can go to our website, collectivepack.org. You can donate. You can find out how to volunteer. You can support one of the candidates that you saw tonight and donate to their campaigns as well. We are going to be back at it in April with our 3rd and 4th speaker series event, where we will focus on making her story, looking at Black women who are going to be historic first if elected to some of these important mayor races around the country. And we're also going to look at how do we address the Black maternal health crisis. So thank you so much again for joining us tonight for our second Our Collective Power virtual speaker series of the year. And stay engaged, stay in touch, and stay informed, and make sure you get out and vote wherever you are in this country. Thanks, everybody.